All right, well, folks, I have 6:02, so let's go ahead and get started. And good evening, everybody. Welcome to the MPART Citizens Advisory Workgroup meeting this evening. And I can see we've got a lot of folks on the board that I recognize by name, but there's a few phones I don't recognize. We got a 586-850.
That's me, Steve. Dave Nguyen.
Hey, Dave. Thank you. And a 616-366. 1615.
That's me.
616-366-1615 and a 586-850-2489. Who's me? I thought that was Dave. Was the 586?
That is, yep. That's Dave Nguyen.
Okay, what do I got to do here?
And then who's the 616-366-1615?
It's Dan Bice. Can you hear me?
Hey, Dan. Yes. Welcome. Thanks for joining.
So I'm just on my cell, so you're going to have to mute me out.
Oh, I don't even know if I know how to do that. Maybe Kelly does. Kelly, you know how to do that?
Yep.
How are we going to know that he wants to speak?
I just did it, and then he'll have to hit *6.
*6. Okay. All right. Well, I think we recognize everybody else on here. We got a lot of our members and optional folks from the communities, as well as a lot of state folks on representing the MPART agencies. So thanks for joining. Just a few housekeeping things here, and again, trying to keep things muted unless we're speaking, and we've got this raise hand and chat function. And as Kelly just pointed out, if we've muted you, you're going to have to do, what is it? You said *6 to unmute. And cameras are optional. I see Dave. Hey, Dave. Looks like only the two of us here aren't that shy tonight. And also, and Kelly, it looks like you've started the recording. Just a reminder that we do record these so that we can make them available later. So with that, let's move on to the agenda. And everybody should have received this. Kelly sent it out, the slide deck, a PDF version of it earlier this afternoon. We're trying to get these out sooner, during the day, and maybe at some point we'll get them out even a day or two ahead of time. But I appreciate your patience with us on that. But here's the agenda. Got pretty full agenda this evening, and it's geared towards trying to have a little bit more dialogue with you all on some specific topic areas. And so, having seen this agenda and the slides, is there anything obviously missing from this that we don't have an opportunity to interject during the community sharing round robin? All right. Well, good. I think we've got a good agenda. Let's keep moving here then. And just to point out that we did finally get our site updated to get you on, Dave, as an official member. And so the next slide is doing things a little differently here. We've got 3 registrations, and they're registrations, not really applications, that we've received over the past week or so that they're in process. And what I mean by that is typically when folks notify us that they're interested in participating, I share it with the MPART agencies, and typically as well with some of the local staff, and just to see if anybody has any questions, comments. Then as well is we have an option of coming to you all. I think under the charter, if there's going to be any sort of exceptions or whatever, we could come to you and get your input on that as well. And so I figured just take an opportunity here just to share with you, these folks that we have, Charlie Schlinger up in Traverse City, He's, I guess, a relative newcomer up there, but very interested in environmental issues. And as we know, we have East Bay Township has just come up recently with some results. And so he's interested in participating. He did highlight in his registration that he's participating in this National Tribal Council Advisory Committee. And, nothing, totally earth shattering. I'm just really pleased that we've got folks up there that are interested. Bob Delaney, many of you know Bob. He is a recently retired Eagle employee, very active in the federal facilities cleanups, including up in Oscoda and other DOD sites. He helped administer the defense site memorandum of understanding or agreement that we had between Eagle and DOD over the years. And Bob resides down in Eaton Rapids. He's still trying to get used to retirement, but he is interested in participating as well. And again, I think these are kind of no-brainers. Somebody's interested in participating. Yeah, we're gonna bring them on board. And also, the one I wanted to highlight here for you is Dave, and I don't know how to pronounce this, Kempesty. He is associated with Oscoda, but he lives in Colorado Springs right now. And I've talked with him before. He works with Evoqua. It is a treatment company, and they focus a lot on treatment for PFAS in drinking water, for example. And his ties to Oscoda are he grew up there and had family on the base. He says he basically grew up on the base. And he had a history, a career in the Air Force. This guy's a PhD, very interested in Oscoda. He keeps his ties there in the community via his father. He runs his father's rental properties there. And so anyway, he's interested in participating, but he does not reside here. He's not a Michigander, and the charter, I think, gives us some leeway. I couldn't see him being an official representative of Oscoda. In fact, we already have a couple there in the area, but he could be one of the optional unofficial members, so to speak. And I'll stop here and just get your guys' take on this and any thoughts from that perspective. Just raise your hand or chime in. Okay, I see maybe we have somebody with a hand raised. AJ.
All I can really offer is we had a similar circumstance with the Wolverine Community Advisory Group, where early on we had someone who was from out of state who was interested, and there we decided that we were trying to keep the community organization kind of in the community, and we politely declined. It was a difficult decision because obviously we're interested in multiple points of view. I guess my question would be, is Dave's interest more in the community or in the treatment industry? Because I think we need to be careful. It's kind of a slippery slope, both the out-of-state question as well as, do we have people in who, really have a potential interest in marketing technologies or selling their wares? And I'm not saying Dave is that because I don't know him, but it's just something for us to consider.
Yeah, good point. Those questions kind of crossed my mind too. I did, when I get these registrations in, I typically look and LinkedIn to see what the profile is and whatnot. And he's actually been involved in PFAS for quite some time, kind of co-authored some papers on it. But again, you're right. I mean, is it an industry perspective on selling his wares? Again, he says, he grew up in the community too. So, that makes it kind of tough. You're right. Anybody have any other thoughts?
Yeah, this is Dan. I unmuted myself, so you'll have to remute me when we're done, because I don't know how to do that on my phone. But anyhow, I kind of echo AJ's sentiment. I would say as we begin more in-depth conversations on treatment, there's a resource available. And we can start bringing additional people on board at that time. But I think for now, the original intent was people who are affected by all this, to have a say in matters and outreach efforts. So don't know if now is the right time. That's all I got.
No, I appreciate that.
Now you need to mute me.
All right. I'll let Kelly take care of that. I don't know how to do it. Thanks for your comments, though. Anybody else? Other thoughts? And again, I'm sharing this with the MPART team to kind of get their input, and so I appreciate yours as well. Teresa, you got your hand up?
Yes, I do. I have a question. Did you mention that he's managing his family's rental property there?
Yes.
Well, then he may have an interest if they are impacted by PFAS. So would that have any bearing on anybody's decision? That's my question.
Yeah, well, and I guess the short answer is absolutely. I mean, the intent, as Dan pointed out, is, we want residents from impacted communities or that represent impacted communities. And, like he said, he grew up there and his father still lives there and he manages his father's estate there as well as his, rental properties. I'm guessing are some vacation properties up there as well.
Dan, again, because I'm on my phone and I'm in a bad area right now, I missed that part of it. And if he is, has family ties and owns property in this area, then that's completely a whole different perspective for me.
Okay. Good to know.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hit the mute.
And I thought I saw Brandy's hand up.
I think we should let him join, because anybody that has a solution to the PFAS crisis should be in the group. It's not anyone that's causing it, but he has a solution. So I don't think that there should be any reason why he shouldn't be allowed. That's just my opinion.
Right. All right. And I think I see AJ's hand up again.
Thanks, Steve. I just wanted to clarify. I wasn't saying we should or shouldn't, in my opinion. I'm just saying that sometimes it's a slippery slope, inviting non-Michigan residents to be in our Michigan the Citizens Advisory Work Group. So, but I don't know if we want to put, maybe things to a vote when it comes to circumstances where we do have someone that's not in Michigan. I mean, based on what I've heard, I certainly wouldn't have any problem with him becoming a member. Right.
No, I appreciate that. And I don't want to put you all in a position of, thumbs up or thumbs down. It's, if I actually did need to get a vote on something, I think I would have to go back to the MPART designees from the different departments, because, we're all kind of serving the MPART designees who, formed the advisory work group, but definitely your input is important to that if we move forward with this one. And like I said, he would be more of an unofficial member, so somebody who's kept in the loop. But if we ever have to make arrangements for meetings outside of these 6 to 7:30 Tuesday ones, we wouldn't be looking to his calendar to do that. We would be focused on the official MPART members first. And if we had a great deal of participation in these calls to where we couldn't get everybody fit in, we would focus first on getting the input from the official MPART members, advisory work group members. All right. Well, I appreciate your input on this, and as we go forward, I'll do what I can to kind of share with you, even anything that doesn't kind of fall out of the norm, so to speak, as we get these. And like I say, typically, anybody who's interested in devoting their time to this, we like to welcome them and appreciate the participation. So, all right. Well, we'll let you know at the next meeting how all this goes. You'll probably see some changes to some of the meeting invitations as we move forward as well, as these people come on board. All right, so one of the items that we had, follow-up item from last time, Arnie, I saw you joined up, and you had brought up the question of the Office of the Great Lakes and asked, how MPART coordinates with the Office of the Great Lakes on surface water surveys and fish. And I think, as I said then, I think we were kind of mixing up a couple of things, because it's actually Eagle and the Water Resources Division that does that, surveys of surface water and fish. But I think the office, that was a great question. What is our coordination, so to speak, with Office of the Great Lakes? And I mentioned at that time that it's part of the Eagle Executive Office. And so there's routine communication, but I went back and talked with, Emily Fennell and James Cliff, two of our primary contacts for the Office of the Great Lakes, and said, what are their thoughts on the coordination? Do they feel that it's sufficient at this time, and what would they like to highlight? And so what you see here on this slide is really just a few of those things. And, in no particular order, I think we've mentioned before that the Great Lakes St. Lawrence governors and premiers passed that resolution last July, I think it was, and asking the states and provinces to join forces, so to speak, collaborate, share information on PFAS. And we're doing that in 3 key areas. One of them is in air quality, something that's been, a lot of people would argue, kind of neglected. People haven't really spent a lot of time on that media, that potential exposure pathway. So Michigan leads a multi-state work group that kind of feeds into the Great Lakes St. Lawrence Governors and Premiers PFAS Task Force, as well as Tammy Newcomb. She is kind of leading the charge with the other states and provinces on wildlife. And the last one is biosolids. I think Minnesota is technically the lead of that, but we're actively participating in that, providing a lot of information back to the group. So that's one that kind of grew out of the Office of the Great Lakes participation or representation of state of Michigan in that group. Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement. I'm not very well versed in that, but I can say right now, as we have some of our MPART staff who are working on updating what they call Annex 8, a particular section of that report focused on groundwater impacts to the Great Lakes. And this is something that Emily said that she expects to see a draft of this that we could talk about in the summer. And she thought that might be a great opportunity to come in, introduce herself to you, and talk a little bit about that updated version of the report. Arnie, you got your hand raised?
Well, I'll wait until you finish.
Okay. But really not a whole lot left. The Great Lakes Commission, again, it's Office of Great Lakes represents the state on that, and some back and forth. They are our link, and issues that arise there, questions on PFAS and what we're finding have arisen. Communications like from Ohio, and I actually kind of got back through the Great Lakes Commission of how we have been working with the state of Ohio previously, and shared with them how we did our public water supply survey, and which they have undertaken. And really, aside from the Canadian representation and some of the things that they do, there also are linked to other countries. And most recently, we've been starting to coordinate with the Netherlands and set up a time to talk with them about what we're doing here in Michigan with PFAS, and then we would in turn, seek from them what they are doing. So anyway, these are just a few of the highlights of some of that coordination that we get through the Office of the Great Lakes. So Arnie, you have a question or comment?
Well, one of them is, and I don't expect an answer right now, but if you could lead us to where we could find this, and that is that when MPART or Eagle was formed, the Office of Great Lakes was a separate office from DEQ. And then they split it up and they put a lot of the staff into different agencies. And so that, if we could identify where those staff went, then we might be able to see better how our PFAS issues overlap into what is going on in either the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative, which is federal and state, or where a state may be handling, like on Lake Michigan, what Illinois is doing that might impact on our west side of our state. So that's one thing. The more important thing is that the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative does have quite a bit of grant money, and quite a few programs are being run by each of the states in the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And one of the things that's going on right now is the Lake Huron monitoring plan. It's a 5-year cycle plan. Each lake gets, and right now the draft is being formed for the Lake Huron. And I don't know who's working on it or what staff we could contact. And one of the areas that connects with what we do is the fish that are contaminated in our river watersheds, and they go in and out of the Great Lakes. And we should hold the polluters responsible in those watersheds for any impact on those fish, whether it's recreational or commercial or whatever. So that's just one aspect. So I'll be quiet after this, but those are the two things that maybe we could follow up on with this topic.
Okay, and Arnie, we can, provide whatever information you want. I guess one of the thoughts that's in the back of my mind when it comes to, where did the Office of the Great Lakes go? It's within the agencies that are part of MPART. Just maybe perhaps within different divisions and whatnot. And so, I think regardless of where they're housed, we're coordinating. And I guess I don't, so are you looking for specific staff like the Lake Huron study? Or do you want to know how we're organized? I guess that's my question, and I'm trying to see how that would fit into what we're trying to do here.
Right. Well, one example is for the Osable River watershed, and I've got our main site is with the Air Force. Mm-hmm. And so the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative has over 30 years of fish sampling in Lake Huron. And we'd like to see all of that past samples, which they've stored, to be sampled for PFAS to see how much the Air Force could be held responsible for. So that's just one.
Oh, okay.
Okay. And all our other sites throughout our state, we've got watersheds that are showing pollution, and what's the effect and who's the contact in the different divisions that you coordinate with, and what are they saying, and what resources may be available to that site or that community that's in that watershed.
All right, well, let's mull that over and figure out what we can get that would be responsive to your questions. It might be actually more specific to see if we can, like you wanted to know whether or not we could get someone to speak to the prior 30 years of fish that were collected and analyze those for PFAS. Is that right?
Well, that's true, but I already talked to the previous 3 years ago when they were developing that plan, but there may be opportunities for money for doing specific sampling that are in the watersheds, especially at the the outlet of watersheds into the Great Lakes that may be available to communities that are on our work group here.
Okay. Why don't we do this for starters, is to see if we can get someone to talk specifically about the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative and, you know, the resources, the projects, et cetera, come in and talk with you guys on that. How's that sound?
That's good for me. I don't know if it's a topic the other people are interested in. I
Well,
see.
I'll say, unless there's any objections, I think we can put that in the queue as well for some of the topics, future meeting topics. So I think our staff would be happy to do that.
And also include the federal money that is going to have USGS develop a monitoring sampling plan around the whole country.
Did they get the money?
Yeah, well, it's being added into this year's. It was approved in the National Defense, I think in 20, but they didn't get the money.
Right.
Now, Kildee and the task force have added 1.2 million into that. Congressman Bergman was the leader, co-sponsor on that project.
Got it. Yeah, we can see if we can get an update on where that is too, because you're right, they need funding in order to actually implement the PFAS Detection Act. All right, thanks. Let's move on to Brandy. I see, Brandy, you've been patiently waiting with your hand raised.
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone. I hope you guys are all staying safe in the pandemic. I know it's really stressful knowing that pollution is linked to these severe cases that are overwhelming the emergency room. So it's really important the work that we're doing. I just have a few questions. I'm sorry, there's more than two, just a few. Either they could be answered, but I'm really want to focus on action and strict enforcement, a lot like I am with air quality in Kalamazoo. So my questions are, what kind of current plan does MPART and Eagle have for addressing the PFAS found in the high priority landfills in Michigan? Have we gotten copies of the reports from the landfill owners of all the polluters that have dumped there in the past? What type of testing is being done at these particular landfills, and how close are they located to living residents and wildlife? How often is MPART testing surface water from wastewater plants for PFAS? How often is MPART testing air and drinking water? I like that Steve said they're going to be focusing on air for PFAS in every county in Michigan. Has MPART tested wells that are not on municipal water systems for PFAS in every county, and how often? Has MPART considered asking MDEC or MSF, Michigan Strategic Funding, for funding for testing and compliance, since they have used a lot of our taxpayer money to fund a lot of tax breaks for the polluters? And I can't speak for everyone, but I think everyone that joined this group and is affected by PFAS, that is group members, we want to help MPART take care of all of these issues. We want to make sure that MPART is doing compliance enforcement and cleanup, and it's being done in our counties on a timely basis. And then how is MPART notifying the public of PFAS testing results and landfill contamination in each county in Michigan? Is the public being notified within 24 hours of learning of any PFAS issues that could harm the public? And that's it.
That's a pretty extensive list. So no, I appreciate you sharing that. And some of those things I think we've covered, but we might need, you know, perhaps provide some updates on, and others might require a little more in-depth discussion. So I don't want to cut you off here, but I don't know that we could address all of that right now and stay on agenda. But with that said, I think we need to keep track of these questions and issues you're raising so that we make sure we give them a little more deliberate discussion. And so we've been taking notes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All right. Unless there's any other questions on the MPART and Office of the Great Lakes, let's move on. And I think the next is really getting some subcommittee updates. And first, if we will, go to engaging the public subcommittee and Ken.
Yes, we had our meeting scheduled today, but we were doing the web review meeting, and it was really overlapping. So we just continued and used that time to discuss how we can make the website better, and that we believe is going to help with the community engagement. And I did personally went on a few of the town halls over the last 30 days, and I found those very edifying. So that's my report.
All right, thanks, Ken. Questions for Ken and subcommittee? Yeah, Ken, and I think, I don't know that you've gotten any more heads up on initial municipal briefings or anything like that. And, you know, are you interested in sitting in on a few more of those?
I'm always interested.
Yeah.
It's just good to hear the different ways those are approached and be prepared in case there is community involvement we need to do.
Okay.
Engaging the public. So yes, please do.
So in several of our, you know, regional leads in MPART are, you know, on this meeting tonight, and, you know, so I'll ask them just to take, you know, note that if we have a upcoming municipal briefing in particular, first time, you know, when we reach out to a community that, you know, we can, you know, invite Ken, and I think Ken, you and AJ were on the last one that we did.
Yes.
Is that right? Okay. And if you have other members of your subcommittee as well, because I think what would be nice, you know, if you guys can participate in a few of these, then, you know, have that as an agenda for one of your subcommittee meetings and kind of debrief yourselves. And, you know, what did you witness, and, you know, see, you know, and then come back to kind of like the committee here, the committee of the whole, and, you know, kind of report out your observations from that, and, you know, if there aren't opportunities to do things perhaps differently.
And the only other comment, I guess maybe this was missed in the translations, but there was one, the East Bay and Traverse City. We found out about it from the press releases in the newspapers. So yeah, we wanted to make sure that we would be informed ahead of time, and we were assured we would be.
Yeah, no, we need to do a better job on that, is make sure that you guys are, number one, that you're, and I see Sandy, you got your hand up, I'll get to you in a second. Number one, that you are signed up to those MPART updates, you know, through Gov Delivery. And then secondly, you know, we just need to make sure that you guys are on our distribution when we notify the public of these things coming up. There's no secret there. It's just a matter of us making sure that you are part of that distribution. So we've made note of that.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Sandy, you had a question or comment?
Yeah, the only thing I was going to share is I'm doing some trainings with the EPA on with EPA staff on how to communicate better with community members and share information from a community member's perspective. So I would be more than willing to do some of that either with Eagle, or also just sit in those meetings and give you some feedback on things that maybe we could do better that help community members not feel a little bit of a disconnect. So just my 2 cents worth.
Oh, thank you. And that would be awesome. Now, are those like ongoing trainings, or is it kind of like a once and done?
They're 3 afternoons a month. They're a week-long training. I think they were supposed to be one and done, but I'm doing my 3rd one. So okay, they're kind of ongoing.
Is that something where you'd like to, you know, have some time on the agenda, you know, at some subsequent COG meetings and kind of brief the group here as well?
Sure, we could look at doing that. That'd be fine. Or I can sit down and chat with you about it and share some ideas, or get other people's ideas, whatever works.
I think it would be awesome if you're comfortable doing it, is to have a conversation with the COG here as well.
Yeah, I'm pretty shy, but I could probably work my way into it.
Yeah, as soon as I said that, if you're comfortable, yeah. No, hey, thank you. When
Yeah.
would be a good time if we try to, tentatively get you on an agenda? Would it be like a January, February timeframe? What do you think?
Yeah, I think February would probably be good.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sandy, is that just PFAS related, or is it just in general?
This training this month is just PFAS related but it's kind of cool. The EPA, it looks like, is doing risk communications training with all of their staff across the country. And so it's with all of their scientists and remedial action teams and all of those different participants. So
that's encouraging. Maybe they're finally getting ready to do something about PFAS.
Yeah, I know. I kind of wondered too when I'm doing a week training with just PFAS, and it's not even technically kind of their thing. Makes me think that they're gearing up for it or responding to a lot of community feedback on it. So either way, it's really positive. But that may just be something I was thinking of it more when I've sat through and gotten feedback from community members on some of the presentations. I think there's ways maybe we could frame those a little different that community members would feel a little more comfortable. So
that's exactly the kind of feedback that we're hoping for. So thank you very much. Appreciate that. I see, Randy, you've got your hand up.
Yes, Steve, thanks. For those that don't know me, I'm Randy Roth. I'm with Eagle's Remediation and Redevelopment Division out of Gaylord. Sorry, tongue-tied. On what Sandy just said, I was contacted earlier today from the Pelston Village clerk. Her name is Lisa Pfasts, and she was trying to put together some sort of a community outreach about PFAS that could not only be used in Michigan, but nationwide. She works for a nonprofit that does a lot of grant writing in that. She's a very smart, intelligent young woman. I wanted to ask Sandy, could I give Lisa your information and maybe you could help her with some of this? I know that part of the agenda tonight is to talk about outside or outstate issues. And I think it might fit in good. And I don't have a lot of guidance to give her. So, and as most of you know, we don't have anybody north of, I don't know what, Oscoda, Bay City, involved. I've been, begging people up here to get involved with the COG, and I'm hoping maybe she will. So, thanks, Steve.
Yeah, Randy, if you wanna give her my email information, that's fine.
Thank you. I'll send her an email and I'll copy you on it so you guys can hook up and figure out how all this works, because I think it would be very beneficial, Sandy. So thank you.
Cool. Groovy.
Groovy. All right. You're dating yourself. Thank you both. All right. Any other questions for the engaging public subcommittee? If not, we'll move on to AJ, yours, the web review subcommittee. Oh, we see a hand raised over here as well. Arnie?
Just a quick thing for maybe Sandy or Steve to follow up on is it possible that our COG subcommittee could possibly get enrolled in this? Or if there's recordings of the training, or is there future training? So we've got about 4 or 5 people in our COG that have the resources. It sounds great what Sandy's been able to hook in with.
I think the training is actually simply for EPA staff who are on the ground. So think of the scientists that are managing Superfund sites, or AJ knows these phrases better than I'll ever know. The on-scene coordinators or the emergency coordinators. It's working with them and giving them kind of a community perspective of how to do that. But I think it'd be something we could all work on over the next 6 months and kind of come together with some sort of a toolkit for Eagle or for whatever to learn how to communicate with that's what we're here for, right? To communicate with community members. So I think there's a whole group of us that could probably get together and do this.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, let's move on to AJ.
Thanks, Steve. I got a call from Kelly this last month, and we talked about kind of standing on the beach, watching this tidal wave move slowly towards us and not really being able to get out of the way with respect to, we're up to 152 sites. And, once we get additional compounds as part 201, and we continue to look, and potentially even additional PFAS compounds are added, we're just getting a lot more sites quickly. Again, Steve, from your perspective, this isn't news, but from the standpoint of trying to manage the existing MPART website and recognizing that MPART and Eagle do not have unlimited resources, we were trying to think about what could be done to streamline the site pages that are currently on there into a form that would be more useful to community members, perhaps more concise and therefore understandable by community members, and hopefully then drive up usage on the site. And one of the ways we were thinking we might accomplish that is by looking at each site from the community risk standpoint. In other words, if there's a landfill where PFAS impacted groundwater has not yet left the confines of the landfill property, there's just been a couple of monitoring well hits. That's a lot different circumstance for most communities than, for example, House Street, where we have a 25 square mile plume that's continuing to expand, with huge numbers of residential wells impacted. And, given the differences in those sites, I think we can also expect that community interest is probably going to be a lot greater in the latter example than in the former. So what we're trying to do is to come up with a nice, concise, upfront means of getting the data across. One of the things we kind of talked about is maybe having, a brief summary and followed by a brief, am I impacted? In other words, are there drinking water supplies that are impacted, either private wells or drinking water systems? And then kind of real briefly, what is being done and what is planned to be done. And then maybe having links to, a lot more of the details. I think the goal is to reduce the amount of narrative that needs to be written for a number of reasons. One is that if there's other areas of the website where resources might be better spent, it would probably be better to do that. The second is that narratives are being written by a large number of people with varying expertise, not only technical expertise, but expertise in dealing with communities. So there's a significant variance in a lot of these narratives describing what's going on at the sites. So bottom line is we're looking for a way to, make the site summary pages more concise. And I would encourage folks to maybe get online to the MPART site. And if it's been a while since you've done it, go to the investigations tab. You'll notice now that there's a nice table in there. It's no longer a situation where you've just got to leaf through all of the sites by county. There's already been huge improvements there. But look at a couple of pages, maybe even pick out one site and think of ways that we might be able to present that information in ways that might be more useful to your community. And we would really appreciate it if maybe you just jotted down your ideas in 2 or 3 bullet points of, hey, these summaries should contain A, B, and C, because that would give us, a lot of useful information, I think. And, kudos to Eagle and MPART for reaching out to us and seeking input on this. So maybe I'll just drop my email in the chat, and if anyone does want to take it upon themselves to, maybe just go in and randomly pick out a site, or pick out the site that's closest to you or that you're involved in, and provide, just a little bit of input, the subcommittee would definitely appreciate it.
All right. Well, thank you, AJ, and thank your subcommittee. Any questions, other thoughts for AJ? All right. Well, that'll be a good segue in a few minutes to one of the questions we wanted to talk a little bit about with this committee too, so thank you for that. All right, well, let's move on to the MPART updates, and we'd like to try to let everybody know what's changed in the universe of PFAS sites. And since we last met, we've added 3. And former Keeler Brass facility in Grand Rapids is one of them. It's I think up to over 2,000 parts per trillion of PFOS was discovered there. Fortunately, as I recall, everybody's on municipal water, but there's a lot of work to do out there yet. Similarly, hard to say that word, BASF in Wyandotte. We got, I think, over 8,000 parts per trillion in groundwater collection system there. And that site has, again, everybody around it's on municipal water, but we've got releases to surface water, et cetera, to be concerned about there. And then Pellston, everybody's aware of Pellston, where they discovered some PFAS in residential wells. And most recently, the airport there has done some investigation work funded by a grant from MDOT. And they found some PFAS contamination there. And we know that there are a lot of residential wells in the area that have been impacted by PFAS contamination. So I think there was a meeting just recently, yesterday, as a matter of fact, with staff and the airport to talk about next steps. So, but that one now is an official site because we have on-site data showing that they are a source of contamination in the area, I think in the hundreds of parts per trillion. So, I don't know if anybody had any questions on those, or if any of our staff that are participating tonight have anything to add on any of those. All right, well then let's move on. And next is just a recognition that, as many of you know, RRD is proceeding to promulgate standards for the 5 other PFAS compounds. To see the PFOA and PFOS, those are already groundwater cleanup criteria, but these other 5, it's been announced that we're going to start down that path of adopting cleanup criteria for groundwater, protective of drinking water for those other 5. And that process, as soon as it kicks off, late December, early January, those, even though they haven't made it through the process completely, those will become enforceable standards for cleanups across the state, which will drive perhaps the addition of some additional sites. Right now, I don't know that we have many examples of where one of these other compounds would be the driver for a site being named a site. Typically, we've got PFOA and PFOS at higher concentrations when we find these other ones, but that's, I never say never, right? And I think we might have an example or 2 of some that, could have something like PFNA, for example, because again, we're looking at really low concentrations here. So And again, that will mean some more town halls and whatnot and more communities. And that's what we're geared up to do, and appreciate you guys. Again, any suggestions and recommendations you have for us on those, because as you know, we've adapted a little bit, come up with some alternative ways of reaching out to communities where town halls, especially the virtual ones, may not be the best option. So Kelly, Amy, am I missing anything on this one that we wanted to check in on? And I see we've got a hand raised. I think it's AJ. Go ahead, AJ.
Just real quick, it's great that things are moving forward on cleanup standards for groundwater. Any idea on timeframes as far as regulating impacts to soil?
Oh, that's a good question. I think from the soil perspective, there's a lot that we don't know yet. And so a few things that'll feed into that, which might give you an idea of timeline, is we're just now getting underway with the soil survey. I think we've collected maybe 60 plus or minus samples across the state of over 400 that we're going to use to inform a data set on what we would expect to find in soil. Because there's big questions out there as well on what's the best leach test for soil. And so that's kind of a long-winded way of saying that, I think it'll be a while before we go down that pathway of trying to adopt standards for soil. And I don't know if anybody else
you don't
is
think it'll be in 2021? Probably not.
I don't think so. I don't know if anybody else is from RRD is on here that has anything else to add a finer point to that. Right, we won't actually have a good summary of the soil data from across the state probably until the end of 2021.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. All right, any other questions, thoughts on this? All right, well, let's move on then. And the next slide is really kind of intended to spark some questions to you all. I was talking with Dave Nguyen the other day on what is MPART doing from more of a national perspective, and and how much of that do you all want brought into these conversations? And I think it's really from two particular directions. One of them is, MPART does a lot of work. When I say MPART, it's all of our various agencies, sometimes with our federal counterparts, sometimes it's with our counterparts in other states. Like I just mentioned earlier, we've got the Great Lakes St. Lawrence PFAS Task Force. I happen to be the chair of a National Association's Contaminants of Emerging Concerns subcommittee or steering committee. And those are just a couple of examples. We work a lot with EPA, the Office of Research and Development comes to mind. We meet almost monthly with them, and they're part of our treatment technologies roundtable. Talk frequently with different members of our congressional delegation. So, I'll stop there and kind of, I guess, a question to you all is, how much of that do you want us to bring to you of what we're doing? Or do you want us to keep it very focused if we get something out of those different interactions that we think is relevant to, state policy that we make you aware? Anybody have any thoughts on that? I see a hand is up. Connie.
Yeah, just a quick thing, Steve. I was surprised to learn that 49 states are dealing with PFAS sites. I thought Michigan was like the leader, and we probably are, but there's 49 other states dealing with PFAS, which is most of the country. And in addition to Michigan, Pennsylvania, New Jersey, North Carolina, Colorado, California, and New Hampshire are just full of PFAS sites. When you look at the interactive map that's on the website, I think it's called the Environmental Working Group. If you look at it, you can see these, 7 states are just bombarded with PFAS sites. I'm wondering if there shouldn't be maybe Michigan getting together with the other 6 states that have a ton of PFAS to see what they're doing. Even Alaska has PFAS, and they've already done regulations on it, which shocked me. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, no, and I'm glad you brought that up. There's a couple of things there. The environmental work group, good group of folks. What you have to do is dig down into how they define a site. And they define a site or PFAS contamination very differently than we do. We define a site as a location where groundwater exceeds our cleanup criteria. It used to be 70, now it is 8 and 16 parts per trillion for a couple of PFAS. They had focused on whether it was even detected. And, their map is still got a lot of density of dots, so to speak, on Michigan and New Jersey in particular. New Jersey's got a lot of data, and again, they don't define sites like we do. So anyway, it's apples, oranges, grapefruits, and pears. And other states are looking, and and again, Michigan, we are participating on those national work groups. And so, I was on a call last week with North Carolina, New Jersey, Massachusetts, New York, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and I can't think of who else was on that, talking about PFAS and what we're doing. Michigan, what you'll find typically when we're on these national work groups is we learn from others. And as well as, like, I'll use biosolids, for example. I think Michigan is further ahead than any state on biosolids, and EPA, as they're developing their program to try to develop some criteria or screening criteria like we've already done, is asking Michigan, how have we done it? And so again, we are trying to learn from other states, but I think what you'll find typically is Michigan is out there sharing the data and the process that we've undertaken as well. Other comments, questions? All right. So, but again, I think what I'll take from this is, when we see something coming out of those conversations, those discussions, we can bring that, as a point of awareness to you. But we're very happy to come in and get into more detail if you think it would be helpful for your charge on those interactions that we have with other states and federal agencies. Because, like, Connie, like you were saying there, you weren't really aware that we were doing that already. And if you guys would find it helpful, we can include some of those updates with you, and maybe not take time in these conversations all the time for it, but maybe send you something electronically. That's also an option. All right. Well, then the other side of this too is, what would be helpful for you to learn from residents from other states? And I know Sandy and Tony Pizon, AJ, others, your counterparts from other states that are participating in some of these national conversations. And, would it be helpful for this group? We talked about this early on when you were formed, to bring, somebody in to kind of as a guest speaker or whatever. And if so, who would you like to do that? And so either you could reach out to them or we could. Any thoughts on that? And that kind of then tees into, I guess, this last bullet here is knowing that some of you do participate on the national stage. Would it be okay to kind of put you on the spot to have you come back? I know you're kind of doing that as, that's part of who you are when you're participating in these conversations, but to come in more deliberately to share with this group what you're seeing happen from other states' perspectives.
Steve, I think that one of the most popular sessions in the Great Lakes PFAS Summit was the COG presentation. I think there was hundreds of people in that, and so there's definitely interest in other states of knowing about what we're doing. And I think that there's probably interest in this group of knowing what, citizens might be doing in other states as well. And especially if there's innovative approaches, it's just hard to anticipate ahead of time what that might be. And maybe you and others at Eagle and MPART can keep an eye out. And if there's, a topic that you think might be relevant, maybe just bring it up at one of these meetings. It's tough to anticipate what relevant is going to be ahead of time, but you got a pretty good finger on the pulse, I think, of what this group is interested in. And, we might just leave it to your discretion as to, if something crops up in a nearby state or even a distant state, maybe bring that to our attention.
Okay, I'm glad to do that. And same thing for you all too, is if, you're participating in any national conferences or whatnot, sharing your experiences next to somebody who's got some, interesting perspective from another state as well, let us know and see if they'd be interested in having a conversation with our team here. Dave, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, Steve, one other thing that if you remember, you and I talked about was also maybe, we as a Citizens Advisory Group, we try to educate our neighbors and people within the communities that we're associated with. A lot of times we don't have the tools or the toolbox to be able to share that information as much as we should. So maybe in an oncoming, for some of the other people that are on this committee, maybe we can, I for one would like to understand a little more in the future of what we could do to put together a, I don't know what you want to call it, an example of one area where people have already talked to a lot, have some of these tools already put together, and share that information with some of the other citizens advisory people so that we can begin to put together that same criteria for our communities.
Okay, well, that's, yeah, I made a note of that, and I don't know if Sue Manente or Stephanie's on, if they might have any thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, hi, this is Sue.
Hey, Sue.
Dave, I really like that idea, and I think it'd be really helpful to get the COG's input on what that toolbox could or should look like. We have a basic set of materials that we've been using in communities, but we know that they need some freshening up, and also should have some input from community members on the messages that you want to hear, that you want to receive, and how are we doing and communicating that. Yeah, I'd really like to keep this topic on the table so we could use that suggestion to help improve the materials that we have available and identify if there are other materials that are needed.
Good, thanks, Sue. All right, you've added to the list, Dave.
Okay, so Steve, maybe we want to make that a topic of discussion in one of the next future meetings.
Yes.
Because again, I know a lot of the other people, I know Sandy and AJ and other people have already kind of talked, with a lot of that information and tools in their toolbox. Maybe they can share some of that, and maybe we can put together a list that, along with Sue, we can put together our own toolbox that we can help with as well.
Yeah, I like that idea too, and put AJ on the spot here too with the PFAS alliances. Is that something where we could have a meeting devoted to this topic and have some various folks like AJ, yourself, and perhaps Sandy and Sue come in and help facilitate a discussion with various inputs to identify what we need to do?
Well, I think before we do that, I think we'd like to get input. I mean, there's probably 25 or 30 people from different communities. Each community might have a different view on their perspective of what they want to present and how they want to present it.
Right, and you're saying it better than me, but I guess however we want to facilitate that conversation. If you'd like to, if what you're suggesting is we should first do kind of like almost a brainstorming perspective, identify the issues, and then come back with some targeted. Okay. Good. All right.
Yeah, we could take a look at the materials that we have, and then have you pick them apart, so to speak, I suppose, and identify what you feel are the main messages and how to convey those, and what means we should use to convey those.
Once we have all that, once we have an example or that criteria put together, everybody in every community can take their own data and apply it to that criteria and come up with their own presentation package.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. That's good. Well, Sue, we can follow up and figure out the best way you think, maybe if that's going to be a January or February agenda item and how we want to tackle it, how much time, and then obviously it sounds like there will be a couple of meetings where we'll cover this.
Sounds good. We'll loop in Stephanie too.
Perfect. Thank you. And Sandy, I see you got your hand raised.
Yeah, just one thought on this is I think so AJ kind of talked about this earlier, but different communities have different needs and are in different kind of places with this. It's really different if it's a Department of Defense issue versus industrial contamination. I think it's really different if it's multiple contaminations from a bunch of different things like you see in sort of the southeast part of the state, or Kalamazoo's got some of that going on. So I think you almost need different toolboxes and different messaging depending on some of that. And so I think trying to have a kind of a one size fit all tool is probably where communities are getting frustrated. So maybe we want to even kind of step back and figure out what are all the ways that you have to approach communities. You're going to approach Rockford right now totally different than you would approach, say, Pelston, that is just learning about this. So that's just another thought to throw in the mix to make everything even more muddled.
No, I'm glad you raised that because, we'll just dabble in that a little bit today when we talk a little bit about Southeast Michigan and some questions there for this group. And I think that's going to feed into this discussion later on different needs for different communities. So well said. I see, Ken, you've got your hand raised.
Yes, my thoughts as this slide popped up, national perspective, those of us who are activists at heart already know those things are taking place out in those other states. And I jump back to a township clerk in Pelston reaching out for help. And of course, Sandy will be a great resource. But I think that issue would be a great place for community involvement to get it at the very beginning of a concern, because I think that's where my focus always wanted to be, is where we were going to help in that initial information to get out to the communities. So yeah, it's nice to have a national perspective, but I look at that Pelston piece as something that we could impact significantly fairly quick. And with Sandy's help, I'm willing to work with Pelston, and we can bring that back to the committee, maybe even as early as next month. Does that make sense, Sandy?
Yeah, I think, we've got Pelston, we've got Traverse City, just popped up. There's all sorts of places to play in PFAS in this state, luckily. So, yeah, but I think that's a good idea. I'll reach out to that person that Randy connected me with, and let's see what we can do to help.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. All right. Well, I'm letting us slip in the agenda, so let's jump in here to some quick, brief agency updates from any of the MPART agencies represented here tonight. If you've got anything you'd like to share for the good of the group, it's not a requirement, obviously, but we'll always want to make this opportunity available. And Deb McKenzie-Taylor, DHHS. Please, Deb.
So I just wanted to introduce Marcus Wasilewicz. He's been on the calls before, but he's going to take over in providing updates from MDHHS and then bringing in other people when you guys want other expertise in here. So Marcus is on today. I'm retiring at the end of the year, so Marcus is going to take over on this.
Okay.
Thanks, Deb, and congratulations on the retirement. You're making some of us jealous. And it's going to be a huge hole in MPART, given all your experience from the beginning here in the PFAS world. So congratulations.
Yeah, and I can add in, Steve. I do have just one update from DHHS tonight. That is that the Michigan PFAS Exposure and Health Study, MIPES, is opening clinics on December 17th. We have a clinic in Kent County and one in Kalamazoo County, and there are over 100 participants already scheduled at the clinic, so that's good news. And if anybody wants more information on the health studies that we have or our exposure assessments that are currently being reported back on, I will post the website into the chat of tonight's meeting. The website actually is just www.michigan.gov and then /DEH bio. But I'll post it in the chat because that'll be easy to find. And you can go there for information on all the different health studies that MDHHS is conducting.
Awesome. Thank you, Marcus.
Thank you.
Any questions for Marcus? All right. Any other agencies have any updates? All right. We'll skip through those then, and let's move on to heat maps. And we put this up here just because, as you recall, it seems like not so long ago we were dealing with 70 parts per trillion for 2 compounds combined. And so it was perhaps a little easier to talk about where we did and didn't have an exceedance of 2 compounds because you were looking at the total. Going forward, we have 7 individual compounds that we'll be making comparisons to from our groundwater data. And so we've had some discussions in MPART on how do we present that information going forward to the public. And it started just because now we have 2 individual compounds, PFOA and PFOS, that are treated separately. And does that mean we need to have 2 maps to show where the impacts exceed criteria? And potentially, do we need 7 maps to show where the groundwater potentially exceeds criteria? So to keep things simple, where our team is headed with this is to look at 1 map showing exceedances of any of the 7 compounds without calling them out individually when we do our presentations and town halls and municipal briefings, etc. And then if someone wants to know, okay, well, where is, PFHXS the worst or whatever, we can pull out additional maps, for a more technical discussion. And also recognizing if we see the data trending a particular way that tells a different story than just an area-wide contamination, we could still call out with individual heat maps for this. So anyway, just wanted to kind of check in with you all and see if you had any thoughts, comments on our effort here to kind of keep this simple, I guess. All right, well, hearing none, I'll take that as at least, oh, I see a hand did pop up, and that is Connie. Go ahead, Connie.
Yeah, Steve, one of the things that I think could be misleading on this map, particularly where the circles are, and they have to do with residential private well sampling locations, those well depths, the screen, the 5-foot screen or 2-foot screen that they're withdrawing the water from could be at different depths. So all of your groundwater wells are not going to be homogeneous because they're not taking water at maybe the same level. One could be a 65-foot deep well, another one could be a 120-foot deep well. So you've got to have consistency on the depth of those wells. Otherwise, I think it's going to be misleading.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's a good point. We've struggled with that. Now, in this case here, in this community, this is East Bay Township, right? And most of, I think, if not all, are, 25, 30-foot deep wells. And it's right out there near the bay. So in this case, they all are pretty much in the same geologic horizon, for lack of a better term. We do run into instances, though, like up in Pelston, right? If you put all of the wells that were sampled on one map, including residential and some of the regulated supplies, like for a school, it wouldn't tell as clear of a story because, like the school is in a much deeper aquifer and was non-detect, whereas you've got residents in that upper aquifer or higher up in the aquifer, so to speak, that had high detections. So we get what you're saying, and sometimes that does require, if nothing else, a lot of caveats or sometimes different maps to basically explain why we have some of the variability. It's three-dimensional, you're right. Randy, I see you got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to respond to Connie. When looking up here in Grayling and Pelston, there are few well logs available. I mean, these are old wells. So if you had a 10-foot, 20-foot piece of pipe, a lot of these are hand-driven. They would be considered illegal today under the current standards. But, these people have been using them for 20, 30, 40 years. I can tell you in Pelston, we have a handful of wells where we do have logs, and we are currently working on some cross sections, and it's going to be very, very limited data, but we're trying to use what we have with the concentrations in the wells that we know. So it's really difficult. I mean, it's not an easy solution, just because there's so many wells out there that just don't have logs. So just sharing with the group, Steve. Thank you.
Yep, no, that's a good point. Thank you. All right. And Connie, go ahead.
Yeah, well, you can always put down a little measuring tape and figure out if you were willing to go knock on people's wells. I mean, we've got wells up in Mayo, Michigan, and I can tell you we're at 65 feet and the neighbor is 120. So a lot of the residents will know the depth of their wells. And if you don't, just pull down your measuring tape, and I think you could get the depth.
Yeah, Steve, Connie, that's a good point. The problem is us as a state agency to open somebody's well and do that has so many ramifications. We just can't simply go in there and do that willy-nilly. If something were to break in the well, if a cable were to break or a cap were to break, then the state becomes liable. So it's very difficult for us to go in and actually do that type of work. And a lot of the properties that we're dealing with are, a couple generations old. It was grandpa or great grandpa's well, and the current people don't know what's going on. So I understand what you're saying, and we have actually looked into trying to do that, but because of the liability issues from our Attorney General's perspective, we just can't go out and do that. So I wished we could. If I were king, things would be different, but I'm not. Just ask my wife. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. All right. If there's no further questions on this, let's move on. I think we'll have a chance to get maybe one more part of the agenda in here before we have to wrap things up. And this, I think we're going to have to put off the site write-ups brainstorming because we assumed this was going to take a few minutes. So let's talk just briefly, and this conversation was already teed off. And this comes from an earlier discussion we had is, are perceptions of PFAS contamination different in different regions across the state? And if so, why? For example, Southeast Michigan has got its fair share of PFAS contamination, but not perhaps so much in residential wells because the great prevalence of, municipal water supplies. And, does that give people a different, appreciation, for lack of a better term, of some of the contamination issues there? And if so, should we be doing something differently for communities like Southeast Michigan, where some of the challenges are a little different when it comes to PFAS? And so anyway, this is, I think, from our earlier conversations here, something that we all recognize that different communities may have different needs, and that we're going to have an appreciation for that in whatever toolboxes, for example, that we develop. But from a state perspective, from what MPART does, let's just, if we don't mind here, just take a few minutes to kind of go round robin with anybody who's got some thoughts on, number one, do we feel that there is a different perception of PFAS contamination in Southeast Michigan versus Northern or Western Michigan? Daniel, yes.
Yeah, so it is interesting. So, one challenge for us, I think, is actually teasing apart that Ann Arbor's contamination is in their drinking water, and it's not necessarily related to contamination that's near Ann Arbor or in different parts of the watershed. It's in, it's from these sources that are coming pretty far up in the watershed. So we have residents of, like, say, Ann Arbor Township that are, not near a PFAS site, but are near Ann Arbor. But because Ann Arbor has PFAS in their drinking water because they're drawing from the Huron River, they are concerned about what that means for them. So, talking about source contamination, where are the sources and the differences between surface water and well water, that's a constant education issue for us. I would say across Washtenaw, Livingston, and even down towards Flat Rock and the communities we have downriver. I wouldn't say awareness is high, but certainly residents throughout the watershed are concerned about PFAS in wells or PFAS contamination in sites near them, even if they're on municipal drinking water sources.
Okay, well, thank you. Connie? Connie, I think you had your hand up. I don't know if that's from before or...
Yeah, okay. I'm sorry, I forgot to unmute myself. In Wayne County, we have unlined landfills, which are spreading their leachate into the groundwater, which directly affects the lower Rouge River. So what we're having is fish contamination. We're having the Rouge River being contaminated. And what does that do? When it empties into the Detroit River, we're going to have Wyandotte. Again, with their surface water, okay, it could be from the other 3 PFAS sites that are above, but we have both issues. And I think if there's one thing, what Brandy mentioned, a lot of good questions, and I would just add one more. Would Eagle please focus on the unlined landfills, and I can give you the names of 2 of them, which are very close to the lower Rouge River, they're affecting the drains which go directly into the lower Rouge River. And again, I say that because to me, the lower Rouge River is one of the most contaminated in Wayne County. And I did ask Eagle, by the way, in the summertime, that I would really like to observe their water sampling. And I never did get a call back, because I think another thing that Eagle has really need to focus on, it seems like you're taking your PFAS water samples at different depths. You're not consistent among your different, somebody will take it one way, somebody take it to another. I think you have to have some QA, QC, quality assurance, quality control on your groundwater sampling and on your surface water sampling. So we're getting the same data so that you can compare apples to apples, as you said, Steve. Okay, that's it.
Got it. Yeah, and if you don't mind sending me in an email a couple of those landfills that you're most concerned about, and we'll follow up on what we've got on those so far.
Will do.
Thank you. Any other initial thoughts, recognizing this will become part of a broader discussion? All right, well, thanks. Again, I think this is just an appreciation that things are different in different communities across the state. Do we have a hand raised? Let me see here. Teresa. The floor is yours. You may still be on mute.
My apologies. I have a concern that I wanted to share with MPART. Are we also looking at future possible PFAS contamination coming from proposed projects?
When you say proposed projects, what does that mean?
Okay, I know some of us are familiar with the National Pollution Discharge Elimination System process that's been in since the 70s. And with the Line 5 proposal of building that tunnel around Line 5, and the request from Enbridge to be able to dump 5 million gallons a day of wastewater into our waterways. And it's going to be discharged with oil and other things. And if the permit happens, are we looking at possible PFAS contamination from future projects that may cause contamination into our waterways?
Yeah, I don't know if someone's on from Water Resources Division that wants to handle that more direct than I could. Because, I mean, PFAS are water quality. We have water quality standards for 2 of them right now. And so our Water Resources Division does administer the discharge permitting programs and looks at, any and all of the potential contaminants that might be of concern, and make sure there's testing limits put on, and corrective actions, treatment, for example, where necessary.
The reason I asked that question, because in that permit, they know that various groundwater seepages will be in that wastewater, and we're talking about groundwater contamination of PFAS. So if future projects coming up will pollute or add PFAS to the water, I think that's going to be a major problem for Michigan.
Oh, you're right. I mean, and you're recognizing that PFAS cycle is, we got to stop it so it doesn't keep cycling through, and that could be one of the potential pathways that we've got to make sure we disrupt. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, you bet. Appreciate that. All right, well, folks, it's we are at 7:30, and this has been great conversation tonight. Let's hold off any further discussion on this and talk just briefly here about some next steps. Everybody should have gotten the invite for next year, 2021's meetings. And so if you didn't get that, let me know. I had a few hiccups in some of the emails that went out. And so I want to make sure that we've got all of you. And I recognize that not everybody's on here tonight. Here are some of the future topics. We need to build the agendas starting a month from now, and we've got some ideas here tonight as well to kind of add to that. So let's move on to the next slide, which is community sharing round robin. And if you'll indulge me for a few minutes here and our fellow members, let's see if anybody has any quick updates, announcements, or questions for the group. And I'll just look at the board here to see if anybody has any hands raised. All right, is everybody trying to see how close we can end to 7:30? Ah, hey, Bill, go ahead. Go ahead and unmute yourself, and the floor is yours.
I just got confused at the beginning of the meeting. I was one of the people glitching in at about 10 after. I clicked on Steve's email today thinking that was our connection. And one had been sent an hour earlier, which I missed, of course. And that was our easy stream onto the family team meetings, we'll call it here. Anyway, it's all solved. I just got confused. Sorry I came on late.
Hey, no worries. I'm glad you made it on.
Thank you.
AJ.
Just real quick, I received an email from Kathy in Skoda. Tomorrow, there's a PFAS exposure assessment listening session in Skoda at 4:30. I don't know if that maybe had its origins in DHHS, and so it might have missed it, but I didn't see it on the calendar. And I just wanted to make sure people were aware of it. And Kelly, maybe you can look into that and get that on the calendar.
Yeah, this is Sue. That meeting is for a small group of community members who were interested who indicated they were interested in joining us to inform the possible exposure assessment project as we move along with it. It was just intended for a group of 12 people.
Okay. Well, never mind then. I just there was no real detail on it, and I just wanted to make sure that if it was relevant to some people that they knew about it. So thank you.
Yeah, we do have a community meeting coming up on January 19th in Skoda, and that will be posted if it isn't already to the MPART calendar. And of course, anyone is invited to that. Not that we're excluding people, but it's really intended for those people who said they were interested in working with us further on that particular project.
Good. All right, thank you. Any other comments, questions, announcements? All right. Well, I think we can wrap things up here this evening with both a thanks again for everybody's participation, great conversation, and holiday wishes. However you celebrate them, wish you and your family all the best. Christmas and all the other holidays around this time of year will be here within weeks. Crazy how fast. So it's been a great year working with you. I look forward to starting right back first couple weeks of January. So thanks again, everybody. And I think we can all wave goodbye.
All right. Bye.